strength training, there's a reasonable chance it can help you live longer. It can make your longer life more enjoyable. You know, have less likely to have a heart attack and die, less likely to die from cancer, and make you smarter. Yeah, I have a hard time seeing how any reasonable person would not want to do that.
Hey, welcome back to The Perfect Workout. I'm Jordan Thompson, and today we sit down with our founder, Matt Hedman, for a part 3 of this series. And in today's discussion, we go deep on some of the really big benefits of slow motion strength training, including its origins in helping women with osteoporosis, how it is extremely safe on the joints, and how it can improve your cognitive health and also help to expand your overall life expectancy, helping you essentially live longer and even healthier. So if that's something you're interested in, then definitely stick around for this entire discussion. Well, I'm joined again by Matt Hedman, and we're having another in-depth conversation about the power of slow motion strength training. And last time, Matt, we talked a little bit about some of the core benefits that our method provides, and that is, I think, some of the more obvious ones, if you will, like gaining muscle, gaining strength, and how that also contributes to overall fat loss. So if you haven't had a chance to watch that, then definitely head over to part 2 of our conversation. But today I would love to dive into some more of those core benefits. And I'd love to start with really where this method kind of began and evolved from, and that was helping women with osteoporosis. So how, from your perspective, how does slow motion strength training increase our bone density and improve osteoporosis? Because we know that it does, but can you shed a little light on how that actually happens?
So as far as our exercise method, slow motion high intensity strength training, it's really a further refinement of some of the ideas and exercise recommendations of Arthur Jones. So when he started back in the early 70s, when he invented Nautilus equipment and recommending how to train not only his equipment but just with barbells and dumbbells and all that kind of and resistance exercise. And so then really the majority of our method then was a gentleman by the name of Ken Hutchins, who actually was part of a Nautilus-sponsored study at the University of Florida in the early 1980s, where they're looking at the effects of strength training on elderly females with osteoporosis. And actually, Ken and his small team there actually developed the slow motion protocol at that study. And one of the reasons why they developed it for that study is because it's a safer way of loading the muscles and joints compared to faster methods of lifting weights or doing weight training. And so there's that. And you were kind of briefly mentioning that earlier. There's studies showing that effective strength training can have significant positive benefits on osteoporosis, or on maybe we could even use the term, osteoporosis, but also bone mineral density, because there's also osteopenia, which is kind of a precursor to osteoporosis. And it's and I'm not an expert in this area, so I might be getting the jargon wrong, but to me, a term that I've heard before makes sense is bone mineral density, and you don't want to have too little of that because then it's easier for bones to break. And so we want to have effective strength training. I've seen different theories on why strength training can help with bone mineral density and osteoporosis. And I'm not an expert enough to know which of the explanations is valid or not. I've heard, without getting into all the minutiae related to that, the bottom line is that you're loading the muscle and joint functions with resistance, with force, and so therefore loading your bones and your joints with force, and so that provides a signal in one shape or form to the body, including the bones and the joints, that they're going to have to deal with that particular amount of force. And whether it's the absolute amount of force that's being applied, or kind of the bending of the bones, or the contracting of the muscles causing the bones to slightly bend, I'm not sure what the actual mechanism is. But on average, some studies show actually reversing bone mineral density loss. In other words, getting that number higher. Having said that, and certainly we've had a lot of clients, over the years be able to reverse their osteoporosis. Having said that, we're not always successful in actually reversing osteoporosis. So I can't ever promise a client, oh yeah, you're going to get rid of your osteoporosis by training with us. You might. We've had clients have that happen to clients, but it might not. And actually, to make the story personal, I'll use my mom here as an example. I think it was in our first conversation that we had for these videocasts or podcasts, where I was talking about her mom, my grandmother, and how she had died from the effects of osteoporosis, and so my mom is very concerned to do everything she can within reason for her own bone density, including strength training with us, and so with her, she hasn't been able to reverse her osteoporosis. Having said that, I continue to tell her, hey, I think it's a good idea for you to do strength training, and she also thinks that's the case. And the reason why I say that is because my best guess is doing effective strength training for her has probably at least slowed the loss of bone mineral density, and that's a huge benefit too.
Yeah, and I know a lot of our clients who have been diagnosed with osteoporosis also get prescribed medications, and that's not something that they necessarily want to do. So it's often become a goal to either not have to take Fosamax or other medications related to osteoporosis, or to get off of those medications. And again, like you said, it's not something you can promise, because it's not a one size fits all solution there, but we've helped a lot of people be able to do that.
And I should also mention too that it's not. We don't have kind of a lot of we have with our company is just anecdotal stuff as far as different clients. It's not like we've done a study ourselves. But you mentioning hormones and or different medications for osteoporosis and bone mineral density reminded me of, I think it was called the BEST study. I think it was at the University of Arizona a number of years ago, and I think it stood for I can't remember what the B was, but the E was estrogen, S and T were strength training, and they were doing a particular set of interventions for women with osteoporosis that included strength training, and to see what would happen. And the average female in that study, if memory serves, they were actually able to regain bone mineral density. So it's not unusual for that outcome to happen, but it just doesn't, in my experience, it doesn't happen for everybody. So that's why I wanted to, just make sure I'm not overpromising.
And so let's talk a little bit about, because you mentioned earlier loading the bones and also loading the joints. Can you talk a little bit about how safe this particular method is on joints? Because I know we get a lot of clients who have injuries from the past, whether that be from running or football or whatever. And that is a big challenge for a lot of people, is
Sure.
being able to work out consistently because they have the knee issue or the shoulder issue or whatnot. So can you shed some light on that?
Sure. And speaking of knee issues and shoulder issues, I'll kind of revisit my own particular personal situation with myself. And I think we talked a little bit about this in our first conversation, so I'm not going to need to retell that whole story, but to just kind of briefly give the background there. When I first happened to stumble upon slow motion strength training, back in the early 1990s, coming into it, I had a relatively severe, shoulder problem with it, which caused me a lot of pain prior to getting started with slow motion strength training, and my knees had been so, for lack of a better word, tricky, my whole life. Like they were just sensitive, I guess maybe that would be a better word than tricky, that I was never able with strength training to really, work my leg muscles as hard as they were able to, as effectively as they could have been. And so for me, one huge benefit of this exercise method is it allowed me to then train all my muscles, including those muscles that involve the joints, which I was having significant problems with, my shoulder and my knees, and train my muscles as hard as possible, and and actually having those issues go away. So there's not only was it just tolerable, my shoulder issue over here went away, essentially not to be heard from again, and my knees, I was they were pretty good right from the start. Like, they tolerated it very well, even from the very first workout, doing slow motion. And so the reason what makes it safer than other methods of exercise or other methods of strength training for the joints and connective tissues is that it minimizes the impact forces on the joints. And I was trying to figure out about what would be a good way of explaining this. But I can't resist. I'm a former engineer, so I'm going to talk about one of, I think it's, Newton's, is this the second law of motion? I can't remember which one it is. But force equals mass times acceleration. And so what we're trying to do is minimize the amount of force that your joints get exposed to, and as far as safety goes, and not hurting yourself acutely in a given exercise. And so force equals mass times acceleration, and we can loosely translate for our purposes mass is the amount of weight that you're pushing, or pushing against or up or pulling on, and then acceleration is basically how quickly you're doing something. And so with a given weight, then the way you keep the force on the joints lower is by having less acceleration. In other words, is not moving quickly and just moving as slow as you can. So, for example, if a person's watching this video, and if I was going to try to, punch them in the face, let's see, it's like just, and it went really quick like that, and their face was right there, it's going to hurt, when I'm quickly, fast, trying to punch them in the face. Whereas if instead, I went as slow as I could without stopping, to, let's say 10 seconds, all the way there, kind of like the first half of a super slow repetition, and then got to your face, you're going to kind of feel my fingers, but it's not going to really hurt, and because there's less impact forces, right there. So if you translate that to, let's say, doing, barbell bench presses, or, using a chest press with our machines, is, before I discovered slow motion strength training, I was just, kind of just, throwing the weights up and down, and there's just a lot of impact forces, on my elbows and shoulders. Whereas if instead you go as slow as you can without stopping, then the only acceleration that's involved is, to any degree, is just the acceleration that's always there due to gravity, and so it minimizes the force on the joints, and then so it makes it safer on the joints and connective tissues. And it's one huge benefit of this exercise method. I often talk about the time efficiency, with another huge benefit, and results are usually better than what people are going to do, in some other way in the name of exercise. And so, but safety is also huge. Having said that, I will say, kind of like I was kind of giving a caveat about osteoporosis, is it doesn't mean that it's for sure going to be safe. That even though it makes it safer, it doesn't mean that going slow motion strength training is going to make every exercise safe for every person's joint on every exercise. Because a lot of us do have tricky joints, and so even with slow motion, minimizing the force, sometimes we still have to work around those issues by doing a different exercise which doesn't irritate the joint, or changing the range of motion, that kind of thing. So it's not a panacea that it's going to fix everything as far as safety goes. It just makes it safer, and in my experience, significantly so compared to what people do for other things in the name of exercise, and so it's really important. Well, sorry, but I guess one other thought is occurring to me here too, is because a lot of people think of exercise, including strength training, as being good and healthy for people, and it can be, and oftentimes it is. Having said that, if you hurt yourself in the process of exercising or doing strength training, which is a subset of exercise, then you're kind of achieving the opposite goal. Actually, instead of making your body healthier, more robust, and stronger, and able to be better physically, you're achieving the opposite effect. And a lot of people, and I'll raise my hand. I've made tons of mistakes over the years, if not most of the mistakes it's possible to make in the name of exercise. And so paying attention to safety is really important in exercise. And because otherwise, there's a good chance you're going to achieve the exact opposite of what you're trying to set out to do, which is to get a healthier body.
I love that you mentioned the possibility for modifying exercises, because that's something that's pretty common within our studios. And me personally, having experienced needing to do an exercise with a decreased range of motion, and then progressively getting strong with the methods so that I can do a full range of motion again. So that's also a possibility for many people. And I've found that is very common with at least the clients that I had worked with over the years, is it helps to strengthen that particular area of the body so that you can be fully functional again, if you will.
Absolutely. With physical therapy, when people are trying to rehab themselves, whether it's a surgery or injury or some sort of injury they're trying to overcome. I am not a physical therapy expert, but in my and again, my opinion is probably biased, but slow motion strength training, in my opinion, is the ideal choice for physical therapy if they're trying to do strengthening exercises, for two reasons. Because it's great for results and also makes it safer on the joints, and so you just kind of get the best of both worlds.
All right, let's switch gears just a little bit, and I want to talk about a massive benefit of slow motion strength training that I don't think is widely recognized or maybe even known, and that is that it can help improve your cognitive function. It can help make you smarter.
Yeah, and so and I'm not an expert in this area, although I've looked at some different studies. But one of the studies I was looking at just a little bit earlier today in preparation for this call was actually a study looking, I think it was on college students, and there was actually an association, a correlation between if a person did strength training and their GPA. So now this, so in other words, the people that averaged an A, that group was more likely to do strength training, and the people that were C's, D's, and F's was the group that was the least likely to be participating in strength training. Now that study was a correlation, so it doesn't mean that strength training caused the higher GPAs, but it's interesting, and it could be that just smarter people know that, hey, I should be strength training. For example, it could be reverse correlation, but it's interesting, especially when I'm talking about when we look at studies done on older people and adults who are at least 55 years old, and had one group doing strength training, another group doing some computer version of brain training, and then another one which was stretching and or sort of a sham brain training that hadn't been shown to improve brain function, and so which was sort of like a control group, and so it was 6 months, and then strength training, brain training, or a combination of the two were effective for improving the different cognitive areas. And what's interesting though is strength training by itself was the most effective intervention in all of the major areas, including improvements in memory, improvements in Alzheimer's disease score, which predicts the risk for developing Alzheimer's, executive function, which is a combination of critical thinking and short-term memory, focus, and being able to juggle various tasks, and also processing speed, which is how quickly a person can make sense of information before needing to act or come to a conclusion on it. And so you think that brain training, like actual brain training, has already been shown to make improvements for this. you would think would have been the winner, but actually strength training beat that, which is amazing. And so, and so then you revisit that study that's talking about looking at college students and think, well, the strength training might have actually been a factor in causing the students with a better GPAs in being smarter. And I've also, in the book, I think it's called Spark, that I read 2 or 3 years ago, they were talking about some studies looking at just, exercise or activity in general on, I think it was high school students. And long story short is learning done after, kind of physical activity, they were able to get more learning, in the students. So there's something to this, I guess would be the right way of putting it. And I believe in that book Spark, they were talking about BDNF, which is brain-derived neurotropic factor. And again, I'm not an expert in this area, so I might be getting the jargon incorrect, but I think that's what it is, or something very close to that. And my understanding, that particular hormone does a number of different things, but one thing it does is it helps nourish and I'm not sure, grow is probably not the right word, but makes brain nerves better. In other words, and again, I'm not an expert, so I'm probably going to get some of this wrong, but my memory is that in lab animals, when they increase, inject them with that, it helps with their cognitive scores and that kind of stuff. And so anyway, in these high schoolers, they were seeing, reasonably intense activity before learning process, them learning more and getting better test scores compared to the students which weren't doing that. And so then when you look at this with strength training, we're seeing the same thing, and or at least a version of the same thing. So anyway, we train a fair amount of clients of ours are over 50, and I'm 48 years old at the time that we're doing this, so I'm not 50 yet, but I'm starting to get close. And if you look at the evidence, it probably make you a little smarter, and less likely to develop dementia, and it's really important. And if you know what you're doing, it just takes 20 minutes twice a week.
So exercise, and particularly slow motion strength training, can do so much, has the power to do so much to improve quality of life, and we touched on a lot of that before. Gaining strength, gaining lean muscle tissue, losing body fat, improving bone mineral density, staying safe on your joints, making us potentially smarter or sharper for longer. But what about actually improving the length of our life?
One reason why a lot of people exercise, is because they think they're going to live longer, and with strength training, we may have some evidence for that. I think it was at the University of Pennsylvania, Penn State University, and so it was done on it was a 15-year study done on people that were 65 years or older, and so it's a 15-year time span that they're looking over, and for when they looked at the people that did strength training, at least twice a week. So they're looking at if they followed certain guidelines, like the ACSM guidelines or the American Heart Association guidelines, and at least at the time, I'm not sure what it is today, but their guidelines were to strength train twice a week. And so looking at, well, if people did that, what effects would, like in other words, what does it show up as being correlated or associated with anything in this study? And so it was, they had 30,000, it followed 30,000 people over 15 years, all 65 or older. And so at the end of the 15 years, the people who didn't strength train twice a week were almost twice as likely to be dead at the end of the 15 years compared to the people that did strength training twice a week. And so, which is a big deal. In other words, if you could, if you're 65 or older, and make it so you were twice as likely to, or maybe another way of putting it, half as likely to die within the next 15 years. That's a huge deal. And it had significant impacts on some of the major tillers, including it was associated with preventing 1 in 5 of every cardiovascular death, like heart attack essentially, and 2 out of every 5 cancer deaths. So 40% less likely to die of cancer, 20% less likely to die of heart disease, and of course correlated with other things. And so the tough part about observational studies like this, where they're not actually intervening and saying, hey, this group did strength training twice a week and this group don't strength training, because you really wouldn't want to do that in humans, at least because you'd have there, you would know that there's a good chance that you wouldn't want to tell people not to strength train. Let's put it that way, or because you'd be potentially causing them to have a worse life. And so, but if you look at an observational study where you're looking at at people's lifestyles and what they're already doing, then you can get correlations like this. And these are major correlations, but as I said, earlier in our discussion, correlation doesn't always mean causation. And so one way that researchers try to let me back up a second, is, for example, because people, a valid objection to what I was saying about, hey, you're going to, decrease your odds of death over the next 15 years if you're a senior, if you just do strength training twice a week. And someone could say, well, yeah, but that study, I bet if you look at the people that were strength training, they're probably more health conscious, and they're probably eating better, and more likely to engage in, memory puzzles and go to their doctor, the recommended amount, and do other, life health promoting activities in addition to strength training. And that is a valid objection. And so one of the things researchers do to try to at least see how big of a factor the other plausible causes are, is to then adjust for them, for their known associated effect of, like, eating less junk food, or in other words, as far as how much of effect that's going to have on having a person being less likely to die over the next 15 years. And so after adjusting for all the other health behaviors as best that these researchers could, there was still a strong correlation between overall mortality, and there was less likely to die in strength training, and in the major ways, cancer and heart attacks for death. And so, not to say that necessarily proves that doing strength training is going to cause you to live longer, but it's some good evidence. So at minimum, make a person really pause and say, hey, if I'm not doing, effective strength training, maybe I should. So and so at the end of the day, well, actually, before I get to the end of the day here, let me also say, so there's also, so that's longevity, lifespan that we're talking about, making you live longer. And I mean, I personally would love to live longer, as long as I can. And so we have, and that's just one study, but there's some significant evidence that we might be able to impact lifespan through strength training. And that's not the only study which has correlated, strength and or muscle with longevity, by the way. But there's also health span. And so if you live longer, but the extra amount of time that you've added to the end of your life is you're just sick all the time and miserable, it's really debatable if that's even a value. I mean, some people might think it is, and some people might think, hey, I'd just rather not, be miserable for an extra, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, whatever it is. And one of the beauties of strength training, if it can make you live longer, we're even more confident that if it's done right, it's going to make your health span longer. In other words, that your healthy years of living to be longer. And so even if that study and all those correlations turn out not to be right, and you can only live as long as you're going to live anyway, it's not going to increase, it'll be likely to keep your health span to be longer. And even if it does help you live longer, then the health span will be even longer, the amount of time that you can enjoy your life. So that's really important to take into account as well. Because strength training. I should also just make clear, why do I say it's going to help your health span? Because it improves a lot of disease markers, including for Alzheimer's and cardiovascular, health factors, metabolic health factors like risk for diabetes, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, it makes you be stronger than you otherwise would, so you can, be stronger as you get older, and be able to walk and have mobility and all these things which factor into health span and living a happy, enjoyable life. So then, if we get to the end of the day, and you say, well, hey, we've got, some plausible evidence showing that this is gonna, that there's a reasonable that'll help a person live longer, likely to help prevent, less likely to have a heart attack and die from a heart attack, less likely to die from cancer, and less likely to die from, other factors as well, and protection from heart attacks, cancer, and increase the health span, not just the lifespan, but the enjoyable years of living at the same time. Plus, as just almost like a cherry on top, it's probably going to make you smarter. It's like, how could anybody say no? And it only takes 20 minutes twice a week, if you know what you're doing. And, and the 20 minutes are not easy. If you do strength training effectively, it's not like just popping a pill and that's all you have to do. I mean, the 20 minutes are challenging if you learn how to do it well. But the benefits are enormous.
And it's just wild, because not only is it a great solution for anybody like right now in the moment for their health and fitness, goals, but it's such a preventative measure that we can take too for every single thing that you just mentioned. So it's not just a solution; it's like preventative care.
It's a no-brainer to do effective strength training, and I would agree, from so many different angles. Aesthetically, if a person wants to look better, it's obviously great to do. But if we look at just the what we were just talking about, if because it looks like strength training, there's a reasonable chance it can help you live longer. It can make your longer life more enjoyable. Have less likely to have a heart attack and die, less likely to die from cancer, and make you smarter. I have a hard time seeing how any reasonable person would not want to do that. Now, having said that, I'm biased, and so I'm not just saying this so our company can sell more of our services. Obviously, we do sell personal training with this particular method, slow motion strength training. But if a person wants to come in and just do one session with us and learn how to do it from one session and buy books on, there's books that exist which will help people, tell them how to do it on their own and do the best they can on their own. I mean, they should. If you want those things I just mentioned, either look better, feel better, longer life, and longer, more enjoyable life, be smarter, you got to do this.